This is a little emotional for me. I have not been back to the site in until just after the collapse, and I'm just really glad that we could all come together nearly a year after the tragedy. But we all felt it was really important to come to Surfside today because nearly a year ago, a literal nightmare occurred here for hundreds of families when Champlain Towers South collapsed while they slept inside it. It took 98 lives. Hundreds more were upended. Since then, countless tears soaked into the ground around us. Not far from here, I stood alongside President Biden, Surfside leaders from both sides of the aisle, and even Governor DeSantis and the mayor, where we found common ground amid that horrific wreckage. And we all looked into the cameras. We all told Floridians that not only would we get to the bottom of what happened, but we would do all we could to prevent another tragedy like Surfside from happening anywhere in Florida again. Together, during that time, in the aftermath of this tragedy, we were able to find common ground. And right now, we need to find it again. I fear now that the cameras have moved on. The state lawmakers who run Tallahassee lost sight of Surfside. The pain dulled. The urgency evaporated. So many removed from the movement moved on. The pain of that loss, though, never went away, and the fear of another condo tower collapsing still haunts us. So today we stand again in Surfside, committed to the site where we found and committed to that common ground. If we find it, we can prevent the next Surfside. In Congress, my Democratic colleagues and I worked overtime to secure $22 million for NIST investigators to untangle what happened here. But that detailed investigation is going to take time. So while we still mourn all of those that we lost, it's crucial to assess just how widespread these building vulnerability issues might be. Local governments are doing that. Ongoing condo evacuations deemed unsafe to inhabit testify to the need for that vigilance. The harsh reality is that thousands of aging condos, just like Champlain Towers South, may face similar life safety problems. And Florida has more than 1 million condominiums. That means in the months and years ahead of us, tens of thousands of Florida residents could be living, God forbid, in another unfolding tragedy waiting to happen, but not even know about it, or have the tools to stop it. Yes, the NIST investigation can help unlock the scope of those issues, and its findings can guide us to avert similar tragedies. But we also know that there are other more basic precautions that we can take right now. In fact, State House and Senate lawmakers moved legislation in Tallahassee that touched on crucial condo reserve and inspections issues, but sadly they failed to find that common ground. And it seems they may have given up. And that's what we need today. We need common ground. I was deeply troubled by what state lawmakers focused on in terms of their energy during the regular session. Frankly, a lot of it was personal, hurtful, and harmful. But I want to put aside, like we did almost a year ago, those deep divisions for today and focus on the common goal of avoiding another Surfside tragedy. My Democratic congressional colleagues and I just wrote to Governor DeSantis urging that he and state lawmakers use next week's special legislative session to finish the job and pass condo reform that would honor all of those that we lost here by ensuring that no more Floridians face the same fate. We know if there is a will to do it, something can be done. And on this issue, they had momentum. Governor DeSantis needs to lead. He needs to get involved in getting this critical issue across the finish line. He hasn't hesitated to take the initiative on issues that he prioritizes. We already see that with the redistricting session next week. He needs to engage with legislators and get condo reform legislation passed next week. So as we leave here today, I ask the governor and state lawmakers to find common ground to stop the next Surfside tragedy from ever happening, just like we all promised nearly 1 year ago. We owe that much to the victims. We have already had 2 condos in our community evacuated post-Surfside because their structural integrity was deemed too unsafe to leave the inhabitants remaining there. That's unacceptable. We have to get this done. We have to rediscover that same urgency we all stood side by side together and said we would address. And now I'd like to turn it over to my dear friend and a remarkable leader, the mayor of Miami-Dade County, Daniela Levine-Cobb.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this somber day as we remember the incident of June 24th, which I served as incident commander. We are doing everything that we can at our level to ensure building safety, but we really needed the state legislature to address this issue, and instead they closed session without addressing it. 98 people died here. That's 98 parents, grandparents, siblings, and friends, and it is on government at all levels, as we pledged, to make sure that this will never, ever happen again. The memories of the 98 people who perished here deserve that. We owe it to them and to their loved ones. Immediately after the collapse, Miami-Dade County launched an online 40-year building recertification portal we began sending early notification letters for buildings and structures that would become due for recertification in 2022, and we continue to work with all of the municipalities to ensure that recertification data on all buildings in our county is available online, regardless of jurisdiction. We are united. 3.5 million people live in condos in the state of Florida, and 60% of those buildings are more than 30 years of age. Again, 3.5 million in condos. You said over a million condos. 60% of those buildings are more than 30 years old. So we are pulling all of the levers that we can to create the necessary checks and systems so that a tragedy like this can never ever reoccur. And we're doing everything we can, but we need Tallahassee to do its part. County government can only do so much without the state legislature. We're preempted by the state from undertaking the major actions that would make these coastal buildings safe, that will address our residents' fears and honor those who are lost. The legislature is returning to Tallahassee to draw congressional maps. Certainly, they can use this moment to address this issue that so many residents, and above all, the families of the 98 victims and the hundreds of survivors and families affected by this collapse are calling for. Indeed, people all across the state are calling for this action. So while we call for action at the state level, the Board of County Commissioners is on track to approve an ordinance that was sponsored by Commissioner Renee Garcia that will revise Chapter 8 of our code to incorporate building safety enhancements. Commissioner Garcia, Commissioner Heyman, and my administration are working closely with many experts to create these recommendations, and our county leaders have reached across the aisle to get this done, and we urge the state to do the same. The legislation that we have at the county proposes shortening the initial recertification from 40 to 30 years, increases qualifications for the engineers that are certifying the buildings, and mandates that engineers certify if a building can be safely occupied. So it will be on them to certify that while repairs are being performed, that it is still safe to occupy the building or not, and provide the necessary safeguards to protect our residents as their buildings age and require increased inspections, maintenance, and repairs. The ordinance was heard by the Board of County Commissioners in February. It will be going through a public hearing in April and actually now May, and then finally adoption in May. So we're looking forward to resolving these issues locally, but we cannot do it alone. We need the state, and we thank the Congresswoman for calling upon our state legislature to do the right thing. Thank you very much, and I'll speak in Spanish afterwards. Thank you.
Introduce the next.
Oh, yes. I am so pleased to introduce our new mayor of Surfside, Mayor Danziger, and welcome him to report on Surfside. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Shlomo Danziger, mayor of this great town of Surfside.
Okay, can you speak up?
Sure.
I would like to thank Congresswoman Debbie Schultz for putting this together to raise awareness for the much-needed building safety and condo reform. I would like to thank all the esteemed officials that are here with us today to lend their voice to this urgent cry. 42 weeks ago today, we lost 98 precious souls as they slept peacefully in their beds. This terrible, unthinkable tragedy deeply affected hundreds of families who had suddenly lost their loved ones, thousands of residents, and millions across the globe. During our darkest moment, heroes were born. The nation and the world came together to render aid and assistance. We found strength and unity amidst this tragedy. While we can never make things right for the families mourning their loved ones, we can ensure disasters like this never happen again. Many in Tallahassee continue to fight for the rights and the safety of Floridians every day. I'd like to thank Mayor Cava's office for taking the lead on this and the county for instituting and putting forward these safety measures. While appreciating all the hard work that they do, we are asking them in Tallahassee to come together now for a special session with a unified purpose: to create and pass legislation on building and condo safety reform. Do not let this warning, which costs us so dearly, go without an effective response and preservative measures put in place. Please work together to ensure a tragedy like this never happens again. Thank you very much. I'd like to introduce Senator Jones.
Thank you so much, Mayor. And to Mayor and Congresswoman and Commissioner, thank you all for bringing all of us together to talk about what Tallahassee is not doing. We just spent 60 days in Tallahassee dealing with a culture war when these are the real issues that we should have been dealing with. And it seems like everyone else is doing their job except Tallahassee. And so I thank the leadership here that we stand with today. The state legislative leadership should not punt this issue just to Congress. And so I'm thankful for the Congresswoman for securing the $22 million for the National Institute of Standards and Technology to conduct a technical investigation into this deadly tragedy. At least 2 condominiums and multi-family units have been evacuated because they were deemed unsafe for residents since the Champlain Towers South collapse. One of which, sadly, I saw in person in North Miami Beach, where I was watching panicked residents pack their U-Haul trucks, all because of their building was unsafe. After a legislative session that put partisanship over kitchen table issues, I am still trying to wrap my mind around the fact that my colleagues did not pass anything designed to address the problems revealed by the horrific collapse of these towers that we stand next to right now. It should alarm all the Floridians who are watching this that the state law currently sets no standards for high-rise inspections, and under current law, condo boards that discover serious problems are also under no obligation to inform local authorities or unit owners. Miami-Dade and Broward counties are the only ones in the state that require inspections of the structural integrity of condos, and then it only begins at the 40-year mark. There are about 1.5 million condos in Florida, with more than half in buildings over 30 years old. Their residents deserve to be safe. They deserve to be represented by the members in both the House and the Senate, not to go back and forth on what we're dealing with right now, where the governor is dealing with congressional maps that he himself should not be drawing, but the legislature should be doing. On the issue of inspections, Miami-Dade County, Broward County, and a number of cities have already been addressing how often to require them and making inspections more frequent. And we're glad our local officials who stand here today have stepped in and also have stepped up. But that'll be cold comfort if there's a disaster in another town that could have been prevented with a statewide approach. And so I want to thank our first responders who worked the Surfside condo collapse day and night. And I believe we owe it to the families of those 98 victims to do our job in Tallahassee. Not just give lip service while the camera is on, but when the cameras go off, do our job and do it to ensure that we are protecting the people who have sent us to Tallahassee to do our jobs. Thank you so much. And now I want to introduce Representative Joe Gelb.
Yeah, great job.
Thank you, Senator. I'm humbled to be here in the memory of those 98 lost souls. It's trying to do anything to speak to that unspeakable tragedy is just, it's a heavy weight, and you'll hear in a moment from one of the families of the people that were lost, and that's a humbling thing as well. I was here last year when the President of the United States came here personally to show how strongly he felt, met with local leadership, met with families, and showed the heart that he has that we're all so proud of as far as his ability to lead us through difficult times like this. I particularly want to start by thanking our amazing Congresswoman, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, for the leadership that she and her colleagues have shown in putting out a letter demanding immediate action. It's what's needed, and I thank you for that, Congresswoman. And of course, our unbelievable county mayor, who, when we met with the president, presented every aspect of this tragedy while he asked sharp, incisive questions, every one of which our mayor was ready for because she took charge of this situation. But as a legislator, I'm embarrassed to be here with my colleague, Senator Jones, because we did not get it done. In the wake of that tragedy, I was among those who filed bills to address this. We managed to come up with, as Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz says, common ground. We had a consensus bill in the House that had broad support. The Senate, that Senator Jones serves in, did the same. They came up with a broad-based bill that had support. It's what I call a Tallahassee mystery. How does the Senate overwhelmingly support something, the House overwhelmingly supports something, and somehow it doesn't get done, even when they've had a month since we've left Tallahassee to be able to get that ready, to just get it through? Sometimes in the waning hours that's tough, but we've had a month. We need to do that. Neither of those bills was perfect. Both of those bills were better than nothing. We need something. And whether it's making sure that there are adequate provisions for making repairs, or requiring not just more frequent inspections but more transparency, there are good things in those bills. We need to get together on them and get something passed, because the people and the 98 departed souls demand it. It's now my honor to introduce the next speaker, a longtime friend and former legislator, and a warrior for the people of this community, my friend, County Commissioner Sally Heyman.
Thanks, Joe. Good afternoon. I'm Sally Heyman. I'm a county commissioner, and I have proudly represented not only Surfside, but the coastal communities of Miami-Dade through Mid-Beach. After the Champlain Towers South collapse, we needed Tallahassee to lend a hand. Responsible legislation is what we needed in that hand to address this horrific tragedy and prevent other occurrences. They declared it a priority, and we felt there was going to be good resolve. We had boots on the ground with our legislators in the House with Joe and Jason and others, my colleagues at the County Commission, our legislators at the federal level with our Congress people, and everyone accepted they were going to be there for the task. They failed. After our unimaginable tragedy on June 24th, I went statewide to all Florida counties for input. And less than a month later, in July, at the Florida Association of Counties Conference, state conference, we counties, Miami-Dade County, and 66 county counterparts passed unanimously language urging the Florida legislature to accept workable solutions. We gave them a blueprint for all Florida county governments, and that would include invoking authority to the local cities that assume implementing responsibilities. There's 3 components, and I want to share it with you because we shared it with the governor's office and the legislature. First is a state directive. All local governments do inspections and written documentation, state mandate. Certify, recertify with time frames that vary from 20 to 40 years. It qualifies who inspects, who reports, and not just on condos, but multi-unit residential structures based on size, population, proximity to areas, and the building codes. And the third component in that, rehab and repairs with the time frame and flexible nature of what to do based on what you had available. The second was recertification of programs and building closure. Falls on the local government. Criteria with cost for evaluation and relocation, ultimately going to the very buildings who present the responsibility that they have, the authority they have, and also, in cases, the failure to meet those responsibilities and authority. And put it on the building, the persons, the condo associations, the parties, the developers, and not the government at a local level and the service agencies. And the third component was economic incentives to timely do rehab and repairs, and timelines with financial assistance. That did include working with our Congresswoman and federal government to do a local government pass-through to get federal funds to these people at the local level so it doesn't gentrify and displace residents when their buildings get closed. Flexibility at the local level for components 2 and 3 are critical. Mindful, counties and cities are the very diverse communities in which these buildings exist. The vulnerabilities and exposure they have to deal with. Us here, salt air, water, high tides, middle of the state, tornadoes, northern Florida, sinkholes, and also the diversity and the resources available to the local governments. And lastly, don't preempt local government. You heard from speakers before, Miami-Dade and Broward had inspections in place beforehand. And we watched anxiously for the state to preempt us. And we stepped up. We also made some changes, encouraged other counties to get involved until the state did. They haven't, but other counties did. And in the meantime, we passed 2 laws already, and one was enforced last week when Bayview, a rental property, 60 units, was deemed unsafe. And the building and the authority there stepped up, not the local government and local agencies, to give back April's rent, first and last, gave them pocket money, put them in a hotel for 3 days, and helped them on the move. That's what can happen when government acts. A special session is next week. Hopefully all of you, like you reminded the community, the state, and the world of this tragedy, will remind people it is the state that has an obligation to officiate over this and include these issues. It's still a priority. We gave them a blueprint of how to do it. And as my mayor said, Commissioner Garcia and I, with our RER department, have a comprehensive ordinance pending. We were hoping the call would be inclusive of this type of subject matter. But if they fail to act, we intend to. The legislation is ready. And for that, I thank my colleagues, because we know how to be intelligent and put policy and people above politics. I'd like to introduce the next speaker, who is hands-on to this tragedy that the rest of us witness. Before that, I brought a package. This is a blueprint that was available that my representative, our state senator, and Congress was aware of, and the rest of the state, in which the state failed to act. I have copies for all of you to get the details. And with that, please welcome to the podium Martin Landisfeld. I hope that's right, Landisfeld. And thank you.
It's so painful to be here once again. My name is Martin Langesfeld, and behind me in this empty hole, my beautiful sister Nikki and her husband Louis were crushed to death and were taken to a medical examiner 3 weeks later to identify a percentage of what was left to their bodies. A percentage. This should not be a political issue on whether you are a Republican or a Democrat. We should not be talking about 98 lives. We are talking about innocent, hardworking, beautiful, loving people who died in a place they called home. Behind me, in this deep, dark, open graveyard, there were innocent voters from all parties and beliefs. Both Republicans and Democrats were killed in a place they called home. How many more buildings need to be evacuated in Florida? Soon enough, we will turn on the news and not see another building being evacuated because of unsafe structures. What we will see are the same images we saw on June 24th, but with new faces. Breaking news of countless innocent victims being crushed to death in their safest place once again. Missions being turned from search and rescue to search and recovery once again. Children, unborn babies, mothers, fathers, and brothers, all taken in their homes once again. This could all be prevented. So many lives could be saved if we just do the right thing. If the House and the Senate work together to find a solution that makes us Floridians feel safe in our own homes. We need your help, Governor DeSantis, before it's too late. I'm not saying this to bash on you, Governor DeSantis. I'm saying this because I truly believe you have the power to make things right. And I believe you, from the bottom of your heart, know that by simply changing legislation, you can help change lives and save lives. And if the only way I can speak to you is through cameras, then that's okay. But please do not take this message with a grain of salt, because the next message could be on behalf of future dead children. The next time we meet should not be under the circumstance that residents, citizens, and visitors got their skulls crushed to death and their next of kin receiving 1% of their loved ones' bodies. Governor DeSantis, please do the right thing. Florida went through a terrible catastrophe as a community together, something none of us would have ever expected. But 1 year later, the new question is, when will the next building collapse? The amount of money that will be saved by not keeping buildings safe will be spent on funerals and medical expenses. Let's do the right thing and work together. There are lives on the line. Millions of people feel unsafe in their own homes.
Thank you, Mark. I'll just close because I think Martin's words are so moving, chilling, and appropriate. I served in the legislature for 12 years. I know this can get done. I know how this works. Commissioner Heyman was in the legislature for 8 years, and we have our 2 legislative colleagues here. Next Tuesday, the legislature goes into special session. All the governor needs to do is add condominium reform legislation to the call. We have a roadmap. He could have insisted, and legislative leaders could have prioritized this and stayed just a few extra days. I've seen that movie before. I've spent 12 years going through many special sessions, many overtime sessions. When the priority is high enough, the legislature gets it done. When the governor wants something to happen, any governor, they put it on the legislature's agenda, and they hold the legislature there until they get done. I'm glad to hear, we are all glad to hear, that they were close. They are close. It is Thursday. If they're close, the governor should bring them together over the next few days, hammer out the remaining issues, make sure that we can get this passed next week, and the result will be the saving of potentially thousands of lives in the future. We'll never know how many lives passing this legislation might save. What I think we all want to make sure is that we are never standing in front of another building like this, that we have no more Langensfeld families, that we have no more families that lived through the tragedy of what was experienced here last June 24th. I never want to have to stand with colleagues day after day like we did last year, trying to help them pick up the pieces, trying to find, why we had to be here. And now we know, we didn't know then, now we know that we never have to be in this situation again. And the legislature and the governor need to get this done 5 days from now. And that's our message today. And we're happy to take any questions. Well done, Deb. Any questions?
Debbie, I was in Tallahassee as Senator and Representative Noah Lott with Glenna during the session, and we attended a lot of meetings where they progressed a lot on this. It seemed like it was going to pass and then got bogged down in reserves, which is another word for money. You know, buildings like this with an unfortunately collapse could have taken at $10 million. Where does that money come from? In 4 days, how are they going to bridge that gap? What will you guys do to solve this issue of reserves, which is really the bottom line of fixing all these old buildings? Is it a federal thing or what?
It's not a federal thing. Believe me, if I could file legislation to make this happen, I would do it in a heartbeat. But because of the separation of powers, this is not an area that the federal government has direct jurisdiction over. The legislature does. And let me tell you, they all say they were close. And we're not here to tell them how to do it or what to do it, just that they should do it. If they care enough about making sure there is never another Surfside tragedy, then they will spend the next few days. They had a month, as Representative Geller said. They had, all the way from the end of the tragedy to now, to get this done. If they're close, then the governor has put so many things, at the top of his legislative agenda and pushed the legislature, including in an unprecedented situation, drawing his own congressional map and forcing the legislature into special session. I mean, if he cares enough about upending minority representation in this state, he certainly should care more about making sure we never have another tragedy like this. That's all we're saying. Of course.
I do want to say that I'll let you speak to the reserve. I'll speak more to the process. That Senator Pizzo, who represents this district now, and after redistricting, I represent. But Senator Pizzo in Tallahassee had everything put in place to get this across the finish line, have built the coalition, has spoken to the mayor, has spoken with the congresswoman and the commissioners to get what that looked like. And it got stalled right there within the process because apparently there was a fight that was happening over in the House, and the House did not want to do it. But the Senate was prepared to do it. And as a matter of fact, Senator Pizzo went a step further and also filed an amendment to include on a different bill to even address the issue. So it's politics at its best is what happened. I think Martin said it best, is that this is not a Democrat-Republican issue. You're talking about 98 lives that I'm sure there were many Democrats and Republicans in there. This is us about making sure that we put people over the politics that's being played.
And let me just say a word about the question about the reserves. In the House, we did find common ground, to use the Congresswoman's words. We did come together on a bill. Yes, there are some differences about reserves. The fact of the matter is that's what legislating is about. It's about finding compromise. If we ended up with a bill that was not as perfect on the issue of reserves as the House was pushing for, that's okay, because there's a lot of other things in this bill. And if there has to be some compromise that's not, as they say, let not the perfect be the enemy of the good. We need the good, and we need it right now, and we need it next week. And it can be done if people move off their positions a little and recognize that we can come back, or well, they can come back another time and get more done.